Hello, and welcome to the Night Sky Reader. I'm here with a story to help you relax, meditate, or gently drift to sleep. Tonight, the slow making of a stalactite. Settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. A clear bead gathers at the tip of a pale hollow tube. The tube hangs from a limestone ceiling in a chamber where the air is cool enough to quiet every hurry. Stone surrounds the space in soft grades of gray and cream. Some surfaces are matte and dry-looking, chalky in the dimness. Others hold a wet sheen that catches what little light there is and lets it go again. The chamber does not offer much movement. It offers shape, temperature, and patient sound. The bead swells almost without appearing to change. More water seeps down through the tiny tube above it, enough to make the drop rounder, heavier, brighter at its lower curve. For a moment it hangs exactly there, attached to the tip of the slender mineral straw by a narrowing neck of water. In that brief pause, the whole long journey gathers itself into one visible fact. This water is not fresh from the sky. It may have spent weeks underground. It may have spent months. It carries with it something the sky did not give it directly. A small dissolved portion of the limestone it moved through on the way down. The stone ceiling above has already yielded a little to it. Now, in this cool chamber, that hidden cargo is close to becoming stone again. Nothing in the chamber seems eager. The air stays at nearly the same temperature day after day. The walls hold a clean mineral dampness. A faint smell of wet rock rests low and steady. Somewhere farther back, another drip falls. Then a long interval follows, then another. Sound arrives one note at a time, each so distinct that silence is not broken by it, only measured. The bead reaches its limit. The narrow neck thins, lets go, and the drop falls. It lands in the dark pool below with a soft, exact note. The pool accepts it without splash or display, only a circular tremor that widens and disappears among small reflections of the cave roof. Above, the pale tube remains. To the eye it looks unchanged, still delicate, still no more than a slim point reaching down from the ceiling. Yet at its tip, after the drop releases, there is the slightest mineral rim, a deposit too fine to watch form without first understanding what repetition can do. This is how the chamber works. Water arrives. Water pauses. A trace of dissolved stone stays behind. Water falls. The process is so modest that an impatient glance would miss the whole event, and yet the event is the making of the form. Far above this quiet room, the beginning is ordinary. Rain settles over a limestone hillside in a light, even pattern. Not a storm and not a rush, only a steady passing of water from cloud to ground. The stone near the surface darkens first in small scattered patches, then more evenly as the rain continues. Thin grasses bow under the extra weight. Leaf litter, dry at the edges earlier in the day, turns supple and dark. Fine veins in the exposed rock fill, then gleam, then lose their shine again as the water moves on. The hillside does not look dramatic enough to suggest a cave chamber beneath it. It looks weathered, cut by roots, warmed and cooled by ordinary seasons. Small plants find their hold in shallow pockets of soil. Broken fragments of limestone sit among twigs and old leaves. Where the ground is thin, the rock presses close to the surface. Where the soil deepens, it softens into a darker layer that smells faintly of roots and decomposition. Rainwater first takes in carbon dioxide from the open air as it falls and as it rests on wet surfaces. That alone begins a change. But the stronger part comes when the water sinks into the soil. There, the spaces between grains are filled not only with moisture, but with air enriched by the breathing of roots and the steady work of microbes. Soil air often holds far more carbon dioxide than the air above ground. In that dim breathing space, water and carbon dioxide combine into a weak carbonic acid, mild but effective over time. The chemistry is quiet. No color announces it. No warmth rises from it. A drop darkens a crumb of earth, slips around a root hair, touches limestone, and begins to dissolve a little of the rock. It happens in amounts too small for sight. Calcium carbonate, the main substance of limestone, moves into the water as dissolved ions. Stone enters solution. The rock is not suddenly eaten away. There is no violent action. It is enough that water, made slightly acidic in the soil, can take up a trace of the limestone and carry it farther down. Rain threads through leaf litter first, pausing briefly on the curled edge of a leaf, then moving off. It gathers grit, then leaves grit behind. Some water will run away over the surface. Some will evaporate back upward when the air clears. Some will be taken by roots and lifted into stems and leaves, but some continues down, pulled by gravity into the small sheltered passages beneath the hillside. There, the mood changes. The surface world is full of exchanges too quick to count. Wind in the grass, cloud shadow passing, the slight tilt of stems after rain. Beneath that shallow layer, movement is slower and more selective. Fine particles press close around the water. Root hairs branch like pale threads through the dark. Tiny pockets of air remain in the gaps. The smell is richer here, touched by wet bark, old leaves, and the active chemistry of living ground. The water moves through this space without form a human eye could follow. It films a grain of sand, joins another film, narrows into a bead within a root channel, spreads again. Carbon dioxide in the soil keeps the water able to dissolve limestone. A weak acid does not need force. It needs contact and time. Soon the water reaches the rock itself. Limestone is not solid in the simple way a poured wall is solid. It is stone with pores, joints, bedding planes, and hairline fractures. Some openings are visible. Some are so fine they seem closed until water finds them. Over long periods, such pathways matter. They are where rain sinks out of weather and into geology. At the first tiny crack, the water enters a darkness that is not a sudden absence of light so much as a gradual loss of the surface world. Root fibers become fewer. Organic scent begins to fade. The enclosing material cools, the passage narrows. Around the water are pale mineral grains, compacted beds, minute crystals, and the rough inner geometry of rock dissolved and redissolved over spans beyond any single season. As the water proceeds, it carries more than itself. It carries calcium and bicarbonate in solution, the product of its mild contact with limestone and carbon dioxide. Without that dissolved load, there will be no stalactite below. The making of a cave ornament starts here, in invisibility, with the slow taking in of stone by water. The descent does not happen at one speed. In limestone country, underground travel is uneven. Some water may pass through a connected fracture in days. Another portion may linger in pore spaces, held in slow exchange, delayed for much longer. A drop that hangs from a cave ceiling tonight might have been part of a rainfall weeks ago. Another may have begun its journey months earlier. The cave receives weather, but weather arrives softened, filtered, and delayed. Inside the bedrock, time stretches. Water seeps over a grain, pauses on a tiny ledge, joins a thin film already there, and continues. The rock makes the path indirect. Gravity gives direction but not haste. Here and there the passage widens enough to let several threads of seepage combine. Elsewhere it narrows until movement is almost indistinguishable from stillness. Yet the movement continues. A wet trace across a mineral surface, left long enough, becomes transit. Above ground, days may pass from rain to sun to wind, and back to rain again. The hillside dries at its edges, then darkens, then dries. Leaves open, yellow, fall, soften into litter. Down here those changes are translated into a more patient language. A wet period at the surface may influence drip rates underground, but not always immediately. Temperature swings blur, sound disappears. The water moves within a stone archive of old seas, compacted sediments, and long chemical revision. The limestone itself is part of that larger history, formed from ancient carbonate material often built from marine organisms, and chemical precipitates laid down in shallow seas, long absent from the present landscape. Much later it was lifted, fractured, exposed to rain, opened by dissolution. Caves are not empty rooms placed inside rock. They are spaces made by water and chemistry acting over very long spans. The chamber below the hillside exists because water once dissolved enough limestone along connected pathways to create voids large enough to hold air. Now, in a much smaller act inside that much larger one, mineral-rich seepage continues toward the cave ceiling. As seepage nears open cave air, another shift becomes possible. The water has traveled through soil rich in carbon dioxide and rock spaces where that gas remains available. Ahead is a pocket of air that is cooler, calmer, and lower in carbon dioxide than the soil above. The crack opens at last, not dramatically, but as a change in surrounding space. The water reaches the underside of the cave ceiling and gathers where previous deposits have already made the smallest mineral point. That point matters. Water tends to follow the same route. One bead forms where earlier beads formed. A tiny projection becomes a preferred tip. Repeated often enough, the projection lengthens into a hollow tube. This is the soda straw stage of a stalactite. In the chamber, the tube looks almost fragile enough to tremble under the weight of a single drop. It hangs straight and narrow, pale cream against grayer stone, with a small central passage running through it. Its name comes from resemblance, though it is often thinner than an ordinary drinking straw and more delicate in appearance. Growth occurs at its tip. Each new deposit is laid down around the rim of the hollow opening, extending the tube ring by ring. The chamber receives the seepage in patient intervals. A fresh bead begins as a wet shine on the tube's end. More water arrives from above, and the shine rounds into a drop. The air around it is cool and stable. Sound is sparse. A drip from another point in the cave answers from a distance after several seconds. Between notes there is only the minute persistence of water continuing its work. The pool beneath the straw lies dark, almost black where ceiling shadows meet its surface. Along one shallow edge, a mineral lip has built up from earlier splashes and evaporative traces. The water there is still enough to reflect a blurred pale vertical line when a drop hangs directly above. At the bead itself, chemistry changes direction. When mineral-rich water enters the open air of the cave, some of the dissolved carbon dioxide escapes from the water into the chamber air. The shift is modest but enough. The water can no longer hold quite as much dissolved calcium carbonate as it carried while moving through soil and rock. A little of that dissolved material begins to precipitate. It becomes solid calcite again. The deposition happens most clearly at the edge of the hanging drop, at the tip of the soda straw where evaporation and gas exchange are greatest, and where each new bead lingers for a moment before falling. There, on the very rim of the hollow tube, a thin ring of calcite is left behind. One ring is almost nothing, yet one ring after another is the whole architecture of growth. The eye cannot watch the tube lengthen in real time. It can only understand that this is the place where length is added. A bead gathers. A trace remains. A bead falls. The visible moment is brief. Its preparation is long. The bead lets go. It falls cleanly through the chamber's still air and enters the pool with the same soft exact note heard before. Concentric ripples move out, touch the mineral margin, and vanish. The sound is small, but it gives the chamber a pulse. In a place where change is usually beyond sight, the ear is allowed one clear sign that the process continues. Above, the straw remains. It remains almost unchanged, which is not the same as unchanged. At its tip, the new ring is so slight that no human gaze, fixed there for a minute or an hour, could confirm its arrival. Yet the calcite is present. Stone that had been carried invisibly in water has taken its place on the growing edge. The drop that left it behind is gone, but part of what it carried stays. What seems repetitive is constructive. What seems negligible is cumulative. Over centuries, such hollow tubes may lengthen to a handspan and beyond, unless they break, dry out, or their central channels clog. If a straw's hollow passage becomes blocked, water may begin to run along the outside and deposit calcite in thicker layers, eventually building the more familiar tapering form of a larger stalactite. But every larger form begins with some version of this smaller discipline: dissolved stone arriving in solution, a bead hanging in air, a mineral rim left at the edge. The cave records no single drop as an event. It records repetition, thousands of small releases, seasons translated into drip rates, slight shifts in chemistry, years so gradual they hide inside the texture of mineral surfaces. A chamber can hold the outcome of weather no one remembers. Still, the scale never grows too large to touch. It returns always to this one point under the ceiling, this one bead, this one faint note in the pool. The pool settles. Its rings flatten. The reflected line of the straw reforms on the dark surface. The air remains cool. The cave walls continue to hold their moisture in scattered glints. Farther back, another drip lands, then silence opens wide around it. The chamber is not empty. It is finely occupied by intervals. At the tip of the straw, water begins to gather again. A fresh shine appears, small as a bead of breath on cold glass, except steadier, clearer, and without warmth. More seepage arrives through the hollow center. The shine swells into a rounded drop. Nothing urges it. Nothing interrupts it. The same pale rim receives it. The same pool waits below. The chamber feels larger now, not because anything in it has expanded enough to notice, but because the simple hanging bead contains more than it first seemed to contain. It contains the hillside under rain. It contains roots and microbes breathing carbon dioxide into soil. It contains limestone yielding slightly to weak acid. It contains delay and fractures, slow passage through bedrock, the cool exchange with cave air, the exact place where dissolved mineral becomes stone again. The stalactite is still only a little longer than it was. To the eye, perhaps not longer at all. Yet the making continues. It does not require witness. It does not depend on urgency. Ring after ring, too small to isolate, joins the form to itself. The bead deepens, clear and complete at the tip of the hollow tube. Beneath it, the pool keeps its dark surface ready for the next note. Around it, the chamber holds the same calm temperature, the same faint mineral dampness, the same generous spacing between sounds. Then, once more, the drop hangs for a moment in open cave air, carrying a trace of stone, and the slow making of the stalactite goes on. Thank you for spending this time with the Night Sky Reader. May your night be peaceful. Until next time, rest well.